Most applications are powered by a database. And the way that you create a database is through something called DDL. It stands for Data Definition Language, and it's a subset of SQL. And this is how you create these tables over here. Now, the nice thing about NodeRun is that it brings everything together. Both the application development and the database management is under one IDE. And in this video, we'll talk about how NodeRun simplifies DDL to the point where you don't even have to write the SQL statements anymore. So let's get started. So let's take a look at how you would set up a database within your NodeRun space. Now, the first thing that I want you to be aware of is that every NodeRun space automatically comes with a built-in database. And by default, that's a MariaDB database, but you can configure it to talk to any other database without actually having to change your underlying application code. So to get us going here, what I've done is I've built a sample application, and this sample application simply collects some information from the user. It's a service request, and then writes it to a database table. So this is what it looks like, and then as the user fills this out, they would click submit. It will then come over to this database table that I've already created in advance called requests. We can do a little query on it, see some of the data that's already in there. This is just me playing around and filling out the form a couple times. So what I want to do is I want to expand a little bit on this application, and with that we'll learn how to create new database tables, how to edit the data in those database tables, and so forth. So before we get going with that, let me just show you a little bit about this application. It's a rich display application, meaning that the user interface was built using this visual designer, and we can see that we got widgets that are accessible to us. And so all of the user interface portion and all of the validation is already built into this form, and then that form is then served up by some Node.js code. And so if we look at this app.js file, here are just a few lines of code that present that form. So basically we show the form to the user. Once the user fills out the form and everything is validated, we insert the record into the database based on that form information, and then there's a simple message that's being displayed. So this is pretty simple, and what we're going to do is we're going to modify one of the elements on the form. So if we look over here, the type of problem drop down, that has some choices for us. Coming back into the designer, we can see that those choices, let's find them, they're actually hard-coded. It's a hard-coded list, and what we can do is we can make this list a little bit more dynamic, meaning that it will come from a database, and there's all kinds of advantages with that. Maybe someday down the road this dynamic list could be different based on department or something like that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the database tab, and I'm going to right click the tables, and I'm going to create a new table. So we're creating a new table within our database, and let's call it problem types. And let's start adding columns. So the column that I'm going to add is just going to be called type. Very simple database. For now, we'll just go with one column. It's going to be called type. It's going to be varchar and a length of 50. Now, what this is really doing, just so that you understand, is behind the scenes, this is building the DDL or the SQL data definition code to create this table. And if you wanted to take a look at what it's building for you, you can switch over to the Enter Statements tab, and you can see that it's built this code. Then you can click the Run button either from this tab or from the Enter Statements tab, and what will happen is it will then create the table for you. So then the table is created, and now we have this problem types database. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add some data to our database table. So let's go right click, select edit data, and let's add a couple of types. So we'll add something like, let's say it's a hardware problem, and save that. We'll do software issue, and let's see, we'll add one more, internet. So now we have some data within our database, and let's close out of that. Maybe we can do a little query just to make sure that the data is there. Here's our information. It's within the database. And what I can do
directly within the Visual Designer, now I can actually tie this drop down to the database. Now you could do this programmatically as well, but it's nice that the Visual Designer has some built-in features that allow you to do what is called a database-driven selection. So we would simply specify the table name. So that table name is problem types, and then the option field. And we can actually select that. There's only one field in that table. So let's go ahead and click Save. Go back to our application, refresh. And what you can see now is that the database-driven selection is just showing you the options from our database. So we can go back and now modify the database to change the application. Let's go ahead and edit, and maybe we'll add something like Salesforce app issue or something like that. And we'll save that. Refresh this form. So you can see that that appears in the list because our application is dynamic. So hopefully this gives you a little idea on how you can create a table, how you can edit data within your table, and then tie that back to your application. Thank you.